to Ellen Road to sign my schoolboy forms, and there was another lad next to me signing called Gary Speed. It's a fantastic feeling to win at the home of football. I just thought Sunderland was a job that if I turned down and somebody got it back to the Premier League, I would have a regret for the rest of my life.
Hello everybody and welcome to Daily Coaching. Daily Coaching are currently hosting a series where we're talking with current and ex-managers all around their journeys of how they got into the positions that they was within, and also kind of talking about their relationships with players and teams as well. And I'm absolutely delighted today to announce that we have Simon Grayson, who's managed Leeds, Blackpool, Huddersfield and Sunderland, along many other clubs, talking about that discussion. So Simon, first of all, massive thank you for joining us today. And if you can, just kind of talk to us about how you got involved within football and then kind of taking us up to your managerial route up to more recent times.
Yeah, basically, my background really was my dad was a teacher, sports teacher at the school we went to, me and my brother. My dad played football and cricket to a real good level, non-league. Couldn't quite make it into the professional basis. But I think back then in the day, there wasn't the money as well to maybe go and make a living out of it. So he chose to go into teaching. And basically me and my brother would follow him around every Saturday afternoon through the summer cricket and go and occupy ourselves. Ultimately then we would play in the school team, the district team, the county team. To the point of when I was 11, 12, got spotted by a couple of clubs, Leeds United, Middlesbrough, Southampton. Went in for training, not like it is today where lads can go in from sort of every day of the week nearly. It was mainly during the summer holidays, school holidays. But obviously we had that sort of extra ability to be able to go into the school gym when it was raining and do some indoor work with my dad, who were coaches and teachers, and give us that opportunity to improve ourselves. So we were given that opportunity, as I said. And then at 14, I had the opportunity to sign for Leeds as a schoolboy. Because again, back in the 80s, that was the earliest you could sign, not like now at 6, 7 years old. It's completely different. And it was quite strange, really. And I've told this story a few times. I went to Ellen Road to sign my schoolboy forms, and there was another lad next to me signing on the same day. And that particular lad was a lad called Gary Speed, who went on to have a great career, and obviously we went through the youth system, the reserves, and he played for Leeds a bit more than I did. But it was just nice that we had that development together as young players, and unfortunately he's not around for everybody to see him, so how he was going as a manager, etc. But yeah, that's how sort of football started for me. And I mentioned my brother, he went into cricket. He went to the Yorkshire Cricket for his apprenticeship, played in the first team for a number of years, and then got a move to Essex, played there for 10 years, and then became head coach. So we've got it in our blood, really, from my dad in terms of the coaching, developing, and was it something that I really wanted to do when I was still playing? Probably, I think you'll ask any footballer, they're not quite sure what they're going to do when they're finished. They'd never know, are they going to be a coach, are they going to be a manager? But I got to, like a lot of players, your early 30s, and thinking, well, I'm going to start doing my badges because it's what I want to probably do, or see how it goes, kind of pass them. And I was always quite, as a player, I was quite intrigued why managers were putting on certain sessions, why we were going to play a certain way. So I was quite inquisitive about the coaches and managers that I was working under to see why we were doing these things. But ultimately, got my badges, my B badge, my A licence, and then finishing my career at Blackpool, I was offered still to be playing and the reserve team job, which was a great opportunity for me to find out about myself. Could I take a few sessions with the first team players, which sometimes not easy because you're in a dressing room and then having to coach and text some of the players in a reserve game one day, and next day back in the dressing room with them. So then ultimately deciding that I was comfortable in where I was going in my coaching, or wanted to make a coaching part of my career path. I had an opportunity to go to another club as an assistant manager stroke first team coach, which I was quite ready to do and retire from playing at 35. Went to Colin Henry, who was the manager at Blackpool, and he said, I said, Colin, I've got this opportunity, can I go? And he said, yeah, of course you can, but you need to speak to the owner about it and let him decide if it's okay to do. So to my surprise, I asked him, and he said no, which I was quite surprised. I gave good 3 years service to the football club. And I asked him for the reason. He said, well, I'm going to sack Colin Hendry, the manager, and you're taking over as a caretaker.
Wow.
So I sort of fell into the managing role, and it was on a caretaker role for, well, it was a short term, but ended up being 4 or 5 months from, I think it was February to the end of the season, which ultimately kept Blackpool up in League One at the time, and then got offered the job on a permanent basis. So that's how sort of my career path started, from an early age to then becoming a manager, and then we'll probably talk about the rest of it in a bit.
Yeah, nice. And obviously you mentioned 2 things there which kind of stuck out to me. So first of all, like you said about your dad being sort of in the teaching background, and do you think any of those sort of characteristics have kind of carried on with you and influenced you throughout, obviously, like you said, which we'll go into in a bit, later on career as a manager, and also as well, I think sometimes, you know, people kind of build up to, you know, thinking where they want to get to. And like you said, obviously, when you're a player, you don't necessarily think this is what I want to become. I want to become a coach. But I think, like you said, it's always good to have the inquisitive side to understand, you know, why am I doing what I'm doing? I'm not just doing it for the sake of the coach or the manager telling me, but you actually have that understanding. But does that as well kind of help you to kind of just get your feet stuck into it, really, rather than, you know, building up and thinking, right, this is how I'm going to set up, like, this is what I'm going to do when I become a manager? You kind of just throw into it straight away, really.
Yeah, I think in that respect, I was quite grateful and pleased in terms of my pathway that I was taking. I wasn't rushed in from going suddenly packing and playing to going as the first team manager. I was learning my trade. Even when I was doing my badges and I was at Blackpool playing, I would go into Blackburn academy and on my day off on a Wednesday and learn from 2 coaches while I was there at Blackburn as a player. Got to know very well, so I would go in and see how things worked, and then ultimately sometimes they would let me do the odd session. And it's funny how when you look back, a few of them players have gone on to have real good careers. Jonathan Walters, I think, was one. Junior Hoylett was another one. Alex Bruce was part of a group that you didn't realise that you're coaching players. Not, as I said, it was once a week, if that at times, but it gave me an opportunity to feed my way into sort of the role of the coach. Because believe it or not, when you're doing your badges and even your B licence and certainly your A licence, you've got your peers next to you that you've probably played with and against. But there's sometimes nothing more nervous than putting on a session, and it might be the simplest session ever, that you're having to talk in front of people that you know or you don't know, and it's very nerve-wracking. So to do the nice gradual progression for me was a good way about doing it, instead of jumping in at the deep end. And I think what helped me as well is that I understood how the owner worked at Blackpool. In terms of being there for 3 years, working under a couple of different managers, and you get sort of a feeling of what they're going to want from you in terms of how aggressive are they in terms of when you're asking for things. I always sort of worked out a trade that with Carl Oyston, that they always liked to have thought that he'd won the war as such. So I understood that if I asked for 10 things, and I got the 3 things that I was desperate for and didn't get the other 7, then I was quite happy. But ultimately, he felt that he was winning the war because he'd got 7 things and I'd only got 3 things. And that's managing people up above and the man management. I think that goes back to sort of my playing days, but also my dad as well, that he worked with footballers and cricketers up to a very good level. People like Joe Root and Michael Vaughan, who coached. And so he understood, being a school teacher as well, that yes, you have to sometimes give people a kick up the backside. Sometimes they have to have an arm around them, but getting the best out of a person can ultimately get the best out of a team. And if you give people that honesty, that hard work and desire that I saw from my dad by being at school and then going off to coach the district team and the county team on a Saturday on a midweek game at schools, it did show me what you had to do if you wanted to be successful in any line of work. So my dad was a massive role model for me. But I think ultimately as well, them skills that he had, I took on board, as well as once you get into the professional side of it, working under Billy Bremner, Howard Wilkinson, Martin O'Neill, Brian Little and people like that. It sort of then gives you a real outlook of what you need to do and what are the skills required, not just on a technical and tactical side of being a coach or a manager, but the whole bigger picture of everything.
Yeah, no, totally. I think as well, this is a big thing. I think a lot of people, and quite rightly so, when they talk about football and coaching, they always talk about the how. And the how is important. But like you said, when you're doing such things like your B license, your A license, so especially if you're doing it in and around those environments where there's other really good players or other knowledgeable coaches, I mean, everyone has access to coaching sessions, everyone has access to coaching philosophies and such things like that now online, and even just through watching TV, really, and watching games or going live to games, you can pick up things along the way. But I think the things that often get neglected is the when. So like you said, you may have the technical and tactical understanding, but when are you going to employ those stuff, and why? Like I mentioned a while ago, I think a lot of people will do it because they say, for example, they might see you do a session and they'll go, oh, do you know, I'll try that. But it's having that understanding of, okay, how do I use it with my players, and why am I using it with my players? You know, are my players in the same position? Are they in the same situation, scenarios? Like you said about the sort of characteristics and taking those influences from some of the names you mentioned, and like you said, from your dad. I think the key things is you pick up these personal characteristics, which are transferable skills, like you said, across any field, really. I mean, we talk specifically within football and coaching, but I agree. I think you can transfer them. It's like you said, just dealing with people and communicating with people, really.
Yeah, I think the big thing is to understanding the people that you're working with and what are their key strengths.
Yeah.
So sometimes, what if you're doing a coaching session, it's not going to be necessarily the best session to put on for. If you're doing a crossing and finishing exercise, it's not going to be an ideal situation really for centre half to do it. So sometimes you do different sessions for them. Sometimes other sessions are not geared to other individuals, and others are not comfortable. So make something, yes, of course, you're always wanting to improve the negatives of players without a shadow of doubt, but it's what really makes them tick. And ultimately, when you're taking it into a team environment as well, you've then got to understand not just one, but 11, 16 players. You've got a squad of 16, 20 or 25 as it is at times. What is going to be the best to get it out of that group of individuals to make the team best? Because, yeah, as you've mentioned there, you can watch videos, you can watch the best coaches, Guardiola, Klopp, you can see how they work, but you don't have sometimes the players at your disposal who are who are good enough to do them things. So I've always looked back on my career as a manager, coach, thinking, right, how am I going to get the best out of this group of players? Is it going to, are they the back four, if I'm playing with a back four, am I going to be able to play out from the back because they've got enough quality to play out from the back? If they haven't, then sometimes you've just got to do something, you've got to be a little bit more direct and not go with that philosophy. So it's understanding the players to take in your team ethic, and everybody would love to play the Barcelona, the Guardiola way, the Klopp way, but sometimes things have to be different because of people that you've got within the group that you're working with.
Yeah, totally. And I think time as well. Time's a crucial thing. I think, you know, some of these coaches who are working with, say, for example, grassroots teams, they may have longer opportunities to work with people in terms of over more years, but potentially have less time in terms of the actual session. So the outcomes, they don't want to see over confuse it. And like you just said, I mean, if you're doing, say, for example, a crossing and finishing session, you know, they'll try and get everything into it: crossing, finishing, shooting, defending, attacking, goalkeeping, everything. And for a player's perspective, I mean, it probably looks good on paper, but it's so confusing. And I think sometimes that's the big thing with coaching. We can't sometimes over confuse it and put too many objectives and too many outcomes into it, when, you know, say, for example, in the professional stage, where you're essentially trying to maybe develop players and maybe trying to work on certain players' strengths and weaknesses. But actually, do you know what? You may be pushing for the title. You may be fighting relegation. And actually, all of a sudden, that has to be taken back a little bit, because that is almost a priority. Because in terms of managers' time, you may not have that time to do that because your focus is elsewhere.
Because of the pressure that you put on from the people above, all of a sudden you're needing results, and your timing for developing people doesn't allow you to do that, even to the point of a project, a plan of action that you might want as a coach or as a manager. It's taken out of your hands because of somebody's looking at results and saying that you're not doing well enough, and all of a sudden you're out of a job, and then all them key plans and ideas that you're having goes out the window at times.
Yeah, I think this is one of the big issues as well. I mean, there's a lot of, everyone's vocal on social media and things like that, but, you know, they want people to play a certain sort of way, and they want people to, you know, influence and get youth into the team, which is brilliant. But like you said, it's not always realistic, and it's finding that balance. Like you said, I think it just depends on the club that you're within, and the owners and the vision, and how you're all going to work towards that as one, really. But it's interesting because it is finding that balance. You know, you said you was working with, say, for example, you went in once a week and you was working with some of the younger players. What age group was that, out of curiosity?
That would be the under-18s at Blackburn.
Okay, nice. And what was the sort of, I mean, obviously before we go into sort of, you know, where your managerial career took off and where you went on to, what was it like coaching under 18s at the time? I mean, obviously, especially at that stage as well, you know, they're getting closer to that sort of first team, and, you know, they're wanting to impress regardless of whoever's taking their sessions.
It was certainly easier than going into sometimes, because I would go into a primary school sometimes just to, again, to help out the school, again, on an afternoon if I was off and doing something. And trying to coach 5, 6, 7, 8-year-olds, believe me, is one of the hardest things that I cannot, that coaches will have to go through. I'm pretty sure of it. So I certainly believe that you are made for certain levels of football, whether it's professional, under 18s, under 14s type, or the real younger generation where you can really sort of, you have to be a different type. And certainly, give me 18 to 35-year-olds any time of the week. Is certainly more suited to how I work. But as I said, we need coaches around that are going to be able to help and develop the younger players and give them the platforms to go on to become teenagers, then develop the bigger picture of being football in terms of the 11-a-side. So it's a balance between the coaching system of who you're doing. So as I touched on there, going into Blackburn wasn't a problem because I wasn't taking the team or anything like that. It was just watching and learning, and then stepping in and doing a session every now and again with them. So, but as I said there, I would rather take them than some of the under 8s that I was doing sometimes in a primary school sometimes.
Yeah, it's interesting because, again, there's a lot of coaches that do go into primary schools and do that sort of your after school clubs. And I think, you know, don't get me wrong, no harm in wanting to progress your career and go further, but they see it straight away as, wow, like, you know. And I think the thing is that I think even in terms of some of the FA courses now, they almost, and I think there's one which has just come out online actually, where they call it facilitating the learning rather than, you know, actually coaching. Because I think, again, understanding when and why you're doing things, you know, they're going on FA level 1s, FA level 2s, UEFA Bs, and then they're trying to, you know, like you said, you mentioned about the crossing finishing, probably trying it with a bunch of 5-year-olds, and actually 5-year-olds just want to run around and chase after each other and kick a ball. So it's finding that balance. But I agree. I think that you know, it's finding your niche in a way in terms of what age groups you work best with. And I've always had this debate about sort of, well, players in particular, about being versatile and being a specialist in a position. And, you know, although it's great to be versatile and know loads of things, I equally think it's just as important to be a specialist. And like you said there, if you're going to be a specialist, say, for example, in the older age groups, so the 18 to 35s, that's brilliant because you'll know everything there is to do with, you know, dealing with adults. I mean, I remember when I coached a under 14s girls team, and great players, but everything away from football, my mind was blown, because at that age, you know, they're making a decision: do they still want to play football? Are they doing it for social reasons? They're going through things such as puberty. So there's so many key factors away from just football, which you're having.
And a lot of the things that crop up when you are coaching certain age groups are certain things that you've probably not been taught on your courses anywhere. And certainly when you go into a professional level, you can have all your badges and everything, but there'll be certain situations will arise, whether it's on a football pitch or probably more off the pitch, that nobody prepares you for it. Nobody really learns you how to deal with a certain situation that has come up, and you're going thinking, wow, I need to then, I've got to deal with it because it's your role and responsibility. Yeah,
definitely. I think as well, this is one of the good things now we're seeing in terms of, and I kind of sometimes say that I don't think there's just such thing as a football coach now. I think, like, we do go into specialism areas within coaching, but also, you know, like you said about the age groups, you may have specific ones for certain age groups. You obviously now have specific coaches for specific positions. And I think that, it's just knowing, and even you see a lot of ex-players now going into clubs just being a body around the club, being that link between manager and players. So I think it's quite handy to have that. So obviously, like you said, you started obviously your career at Blackpool, the managerial side of things, and talk us through kind of what happened from there, and then where you've kind of moved on to in terms of your career.
Yeah, and so I got the job on a full-time basis, and within our first year, we got promoted via the playoffs, beating Yeovil. We had an experienced number 2, Tony Parks, who had been at Blackburn for a number of years. I think it was Tony probably in his 60s then. But I knew that because I played the game for 20 odd years, but I didn't know everything about coaching and managing, and I needed somebody as a mentor, somebody to learn from. And to keep me on side and on the right direction, because I would think about certain situations, team shape, or who was going to play, what sessions we were going to do, how I was going to deal with other things off the pitch that we spoke about as well. But Tony was always there just to guide me and say, right, have you thought about this? Never told me what to do, without a shadow of doubt, because I was the manager. But he would suggest it. He would have a nice way of dealing with it. And all of a sudden you're thinking, yeah, he's right there. I can see why he's suggesting that we do this. So I think that was the biggest influence I had to start with. And it was a real conscious decision that I made, that I wanted somebody alongside me to work with who experienced and gone through a lot of time on the pitch, coaching, but ultimately off the pitch as well. So we got promoted, winning the last 7 league games of the season on the bounce, winning the 2 semi-finals and then the Wembley appearance. So we went 10 games on the bounce winning, which takes some doing. And we had a group of players that was hard working, everything that I wanted to be, that I was as a player probably, but I'd learned from my mentors and my dad and other people. I wanted the group of players to reflect on me. So basically, hard working, honest, give everything that you're going to do, and ultimately make sure if you're a defender, to defend properly. If you're an attacker, go and enjoy yourself, go and express yourselves. I don't mind players, even now, 15 years in the game and 700 games nearly, I still want the top end of the pitch to go and express themselves. I don't mind them trying to take people on and score goals. I mind them if they're on their 18-yard box and they're trying to nutmeg somebody from the opposition, then that isn't the right thing to do. So all them sort of beliefs that I had going into being a manager, I wanted to carry right the way through my career. And ultimately, I'm changing all the time and looking at things. But it was a good starting point for me going to Blackpool, understanding that there's a lot of things off the pitch that weren't right, but you get on with it. Yeah. The football side, we were taking care of ourselves. The first year in our championship, we stayed up. And then the second year in the championship, I got a call at Christmas. Do I want to go to Leeds as a manager? And I'm a Leeds supporter. I played a few times for them. So to go back as a manager, regardless of sort of what division they were in, because as I said, Blackpool were in the championship and Leeds were in League One. Yeah. It was like a surreal phone call, and ultimately Blackpool didn't want me to go, so I had to resign, and some legal things came off the back of it. But ultimately, I got there, and it was just a dream to walk out on Boxing Day for my first game there, down the tunnel, and thinking, wow, so many greats have walked down this tunnel: Don Revie, Howard Wilkinson, Jimmy Armfield, and people like that. It was like I had to pinch myself, but then it's work mode, and I'm there as a fan, but ultimately I'm there as a professional to do whatever I can do to get Leeds out of League One into the Championship again.
Nice. And in terms of that, so obviously, like you said, obviously you in terms of going from Blackpool, in terms of then going to Leeds, what is that difference like? Because I mean, obviously, in terms of, you know, Blackpool are a big club, obviously I was in the Championship, Leeds obviously massive club, and we're in League One. What was that kind of like from your point of view in terms of, number one, going to Leeds, which like has that history behind it, but then obviously in terms of Blackpool, had the league behind it at the time. Is there sort of, obviously you have the pressures of the different leagues and having to adapt to that, but yeah, is there a pressure of going into a big club as well and having it all on your back?
Yeah, definitely. And I think anytime you go to a really big club, as you said, Leeds are, and it was a team that I've grown up supporting as well, that there wasn't a level of expectancy more than there was at Blackpool. Don't get me wrong, there's expectancy levels at every football club, because that particular club and supporters want you to do the best that they could. But I just felt, and the history with me supporting the club was that I'm going to a really, really big football club, and I'm going to carry all these beliefs and philosophies forward with me that have proved quite successful so far. But ultimately, then I had to find a different way of dealing with other situations, and the expectancy level, sort of the scrutinisation that you're under then more. You're talking probably 10, 12 years ago now when I first went there. So there wasn't the social media intent that there is now, and the scrutiny, but you did have a scrutiny of supporters that were not just in the city of Leeds. They were up and down the country and into Europe. I know I'd go away for weekends sometimes or to watch games abroad, and it was like you'd walk across the road and suddenly somebody's beeping you, giving the Leeds salute, and it's like, that's just this icon and the size of a football club that Leeds was at that time. And so if you put all them factors together, it was exciting, but a little bit daunting, a little bit. But I felt that even if I'd not supported Leeds and it was another big club like Leeds, I would have gone, because I wanted to test myself again and thinking that I'm on a progression now. I've done well at Blackpool. The next step in my career is going to manage a step up past Blackpool.
Yeah, nice. And I think this is a big thing as well. People sometimes associate, progressions and steps up with league and leagues and things like that, and go, we'll have to go to the next league. But I think, like you just said there, at that time as well, Leeds was still a massive club, and they always have been a massive club, regardless of which division they've been in. And like you said, taking a project like that as well, like you said, exciting, but also there is that pressure, but then also taking on the rewards of being in those situations. How important was it? And did you take your team, which you had at Blackpool, your backroom staff with you, did you take them to Leeds? And how important was it to get that right at Leeds, in terms of, obviously you was going back a division, but again, taking on the massive club and taking on the sort of goals and objectives which you wanted to achieve there?
Well, the thing, it was hard enough getting myself out of Blackpool, so then to go and rub salt in the wounds by taking my coaching staff there was something that I didn't feel was appropriate to do. So I didn't go back for Tony Parks. Yes, I'd had 3 years experience doing a coach as a manager and learned from Tony. But so then I looked round at the people who I thought, right, who was going to come with me? And ultimately, one of the people that came with me was Ian Miller, who had been the under-18 coach at Blackburn and the reserve team coach when I was going in and learning my trade. So I knew what I was getting with somebody, how he worked. I think he knew me to a certain degree. And then an ex-player who I was at Leeds with, first when I was a young pro, was Glyn Snodding, he'd been at West Ham, in different West Ham, Southampton, Hearts as stroke assistant manager, first team coach, under reserve team manager, working with Alan Kirbishley, Mervyn Day, George Burley and people like that. So I got the friendship with him. I knew he was good at his job, and I knew that he'd got his experience as well from learning from these people and dealing with big clubs. West Ham, Southampton and Hearts are definitely big clubs. So I knew that we would get on off the pitch, and I knew that what I was getting alongside me as well in terms of on the pitch and the crucial decisions, training sessions that we're doing. So it was starting afresh, but it wasn't from scratch, because I knew sort of the lads that I was going to be bringing in and what they brought to the table.
Nice. And do you think that's, I mean, I've talked quite a lot about relationships with players and managers, or players and coaches. Do you think that's quite important as well in terms of having, relationships with your backroom staff? Because like you mentioned about when Tony Parks, originally he would sort of not question you, but he'd put some thoughts into your head and you go, oh, yeah, did I think about that? And, should I try that out, kind of thing? And I think sometimes obviously you see now where, like you said, it might be similar situations where managers go into clubs, but they don't go in with their backroom staff. They go in with the staff that are already there, because at the same time, I suppose you kind of need that little bit of balance with, like you said, the ex-player, people who know the club as well. And obviously, you come anyway, but in terms of just in a general aspect of things.
Yeah, I think it's changed a little bit over the years that I've been involved, in terms of Glyn he's been with me nearly at every club as my assistant manager. And it is important that you have people around you that you know and trust, because they know what makes you tick. Yeah. They know when to deal with a certain situation that they don't need to bring from a player to you, because they can deal with it. They know what my chain of thought was in terms of training sessions, how we were going to work, how we were going to play, what types of players we were doing in terms of recruitment as well. And ultimately, I knew what I was getting from them. I knew that sometimes in the dressing room, I would be the good cop or the bad cop, and the other one would be the other way around as well after a defeat. But it was having that trust of the people alongside you. But I was certainly still open to having other people alongside me. I know when I went to, so I took Glyn and Ian with me from Leeds to Huddersfield. And then when I went to Preston, they want me to keep on one of the existing coaching staff, which I didn't have a problem with. So I took Glyn with me, and Ian eventually came as head chief scout. So he kept, and he started doing a bit of that role anyway. So we were still together, and I saw a different side to what Ian could bring to the group. And then I kept the other bloke on for 18 months, because sometimes, as you said, if you're going into another club and you don't really know much about the club, then you need you do need a little bit of inside help. You do need somebody to tell you about players that maybe you've not heard of and what makes them tick in the short term. Ultimately, over a longer period of time, weeks and months, you then get to understand who you're working with, what's the best, how to get the best out of that particular player. So I've been fine in inheriting people, but I've always liked to have that at least one member of staff going in with me that sort of, again, I knew, trusted, they knew how I worked, and it helps you settle in quicker, I think.
Yeah, totally. I think, like I said, in terms of getting used to your environment and also that connection with the players straight away initially as well, you know, if they see a totally new group, obviously they're motivated because they want to impress you as a manager and as coaches, but I think, yeah, ultimately as well, it does help with that environment. And obviously you talk to, especially when you, like you said, at Blackpool and you managed to get promoted via the playoffs. Obviously that's something which is, you've been a continuous theme really throughout your career in terms of having success and getting promoted through playoffs. Do you think that was kind of a big experience for you to help you within those sort of situations? Because obviously in terms of playing in the league, you know, that's kind of continuous throughout wherever you go, but being in the playoffs is a totally different experience. You know, you've got your 3 games which you're having to get really motivated for. It's over 2 legs, the first one, and then obviously it's a final, especially at, like, you know, stadiums like Wembley, and it's a totally different environment to what some players may have even never experienced in their life. So how did you kind of feel that helped you through the later playoffs you went through?
I think each playoff situation was different to each club. Yeah. But what I did do was I learned from my experience as a player, because I was very fortunate that as a player, I left Leeds to go to Leicester, and within 11 games of being in Leicester's first team, we were playing in the Championship playoff final against Blackburn. Yeah. The following season, we lost to Swindon in the playoff final. The third season, I was captain for Leicester against Derby, which we won. The following season, we got relegated back from the Premier League. The season after, we beat Crystal Palace in a playoff final. So I had 4 seasons of being in playoff finals out of 5, and got used to sort of the build up to them and the pressure that is involved in them games. And what I did draw on from the experiences was that tried to take as much pressure off the players as possible going into each of the games, but ultimately try and embrace it and say to them, right, if you can win these particular games without putting too much pressure on them, that you're going to be a new batch of heroes for this football club. Yeah. And I was going into the playoff final with Blackpool, as I said before, we won 7 games on the trot. So we just felt that we had this invincibility about us, but not arrogance as well. We weren't going into games thinking, oh, this is going to be us at final, we're going to win. We knew we still had to have the same beliefs and philosophies that had got us to where we had. We didn't want to be doing different things. And then I've learned on the build up to the final from my playing days, can I get the ticket situations out of the way? Can we go suited and booted? Can we go and do this? Because I felt that all these things would help us in our build up. And then I go into the Huddersfield one, where it was a different situation there, because they were already in the top 4, and I got the job when they sacked Lee Clark, and it was always quite inevitable it was going to be a playoff situation. So we had a bit of time to think, right, this is how we're going to approach ourselves, and then it's who you're playing against, how we can hurt them, how make sure that we're still in the second leg when you come back to the home tie, because I always felt you couldn't really win the first leg, but you could certainly lose it. So we always want to make sure that we're always having a chance of getting through in the second leg, and we did that. And the Huddersfield final was just one of them games that we did exactly the same build-up for a few days before. Went down to London, went round an empty stadium at Wembley to sample it. We went the day before to the previous playoff final. So then the players could sample Wembley empty, but then they could sample it, whether it's a League 2 final with 30,000 there, or if it was a Championship final with 70,000, that then it's not a surprise to them. So again, I was drawing experiences, what we're doing, and that was a weird game, that playoff final, that we 0-0 dour game, and we won on the 22nd penalty. Our goalkeeper scored and their goalkeeper missed it, and that was a strange way. But that probably the most satisfying of my playoff wins was the Preston one, because we'd gone into the last game of the season. Yeah. Automatic promotion was in our hands. We were going to Colchester, who had to win to stay up, actually. So it wasn't never going to be an easy game. But we were in good form. I think we'd lost once since January, and then we lost 1-0, and it was like a real difficult experience. The players were so down, and you speak to the players in the dressing room afterwards, and whatever you said was going in one ear and out the other ear. They were just so down that they messed up an opportunity, that not given everything they should have done. We basically froze quite a few of them, to be fair, on the day, which wasn't great going into a playoff situation. So as we were on the bus coming back, we're going from Colchester's ground to Stansted. I think we were flying back, and the bus was so quiet. But the players were talking a little bit, but not anywhere near the level that you'd expect. And so I stopped the bus at a lay-by, and I just said to the players, look, we have got a second opportunity now. There'll be teams that finish in 7th who are going to be sat on a beach thinking what if maybe could be happening. We've now got a second opportunity. Don't waste this opportunity. I said, right, you can have tomorrow off. And then when we come in on Tuesday, we've got Tuesday, Wednesday to focus for Thursday night's game. I don't want to hear about what's happened previously on Sunday. It's about what we're going to go into the future now. We're going to go in with a positive mindset. We're going to make sure that we do this, we do that. And the players, full credit to them, came in on that Tuesday, never talked about the negativity of the Colchester game. Beat Colchester Chesterfield 1-0 away from home, won 3-0 in the semi-final at home. And then we went to Wembley playing Swindon, who were a real good football team, but we just sort of knew what we were capable of doing in that game. And we came up with master plan. That's not right. We came up with a plan, which ended up being a master plan. That we knew how they were going to play, that they would dominate the ball because that's how they played, but they would throw bodies forward and we'd hit them on the counter-attack. So Swindon that day had 65% possession and we had 35%, but we beat them 4-0. So it's all about horses for courses. And so the element of picking players up again psychologically played a massive part in our success, rather than any tactical battle that you have to deal with as well.
Yeah, totally. I think as well, I mean, it's a word which is often sometimes thrown about, and I think sometimes often seen as a negative, but I think definitely in terms of, as I've been a coach and the longer it's gone on, I've used it a lot more, which is a bit bizarre in terms of, like I said, people see it as a negative, but failure. I think people are scared of the word failure. They talk about failure as a negative thing. But I talk about failure as an experience. And I think even in terms of what you were saying in terms of when you was a player, and you'd been through player examples and scenarios, and some went okay, some didn't when you was a player. Well, you take those experiences and you understand. And even, for example, there, like you said, in terms of losing against a team which is fighting for relegation, and then obviously having to go into that scenario, it's like you said, how do you get those players up? But I think sometimes players feel, I've failed, and they shut off completely. Whereas it's an experience that they faced. It's now, how do they turn those experiences and make it into more positive and more of a successful one? So I think that, like I said, that psychological side is so important with it all.
Well, the thing that happened as well, when as the Leeds, we got to the semi-final in my first season from Christmas to there, and we lost in a playoff semi-final. So we used it as a motivation for next season when we came back. And even the Preston situation, the previous season, we lost in a semi-final as well against Rotherham. So again, we used it as a motivation. I would look to turn negatives into positives, that let's draw from this experience. Let's make sure that we're not feeling like this. Let's make sure that we're not seeing the opposition fans running on the pitch and celebrating, and it's us that were disappointed and despondent. And that's what we found that we had to do. And even going into the playoff final with Preston, it was our 10th attempt of trying to get promoted. The 9 other times had been failures, whether the finals or the semi-finals. And all I kept on getting asked was in the build-up to the games was, well, what about the record? And I said it all the time, records are there to be broken. Yeah. One day Preston will get through a playoff semi-final and win a final, and then the record will be broken. So I think sometimes with the manager sort of beating that drum, I think the mindset that goes into the players, that they weren't going to sort of give up the opportunity from the second opportunity they've been given by losing at Colchester, but also the positive mindset that we had as a coaching staff was, well, why can't we go and win this playoff final? If you win this playoff final, we kept on saying, you will go down, as I mentioned earlier, and when I was speaking to players, you will go down as the group that broke the hoodoo of Preston North End's playoff finals, and then become a generation of new heroes because you've got promoted in the best way of doing it. Don't get me wrong, getting promoted as a top 2 is ideal without a shadow of doubt, because you get extra time off, you're on a beach quicker. But if you can be guaranteed getting promoted via the playoffs at Wembley, believe me, there is no greater feeling. As I mentioned, I've lost there as a player, but I've won there a few times as a player as well, and a manager, and it's a fantastic feeling to win at the home of football.
Yeah, totally. I agree with that. I think, you know, you go through the experience of it's almost like, I know it's lost its way a little bit now, but the FA Cup, it's almost like that. You know, it's a cup competition at the end of the day, a playoff, and you know, you go into it, and like you said, you've got the home, maybe away leg, and then you go and, like you said, playing at Wembley is totally different experience. And you know, I think some experiences which players will never get to face, and you know, like you said, they may always go up as a top two, but like I said, winning something there and just even playing there as well is unreal. And so in terms of as well, when you've obviously been promoted in terms of through playoffs or just through sort of going into different clubs and different roles, what's it then like coaching taking up in a championship? Because obviously they say now, especially as well, there's not much of a difference really between the championship and Premier League. And, you know, in terms of, I think we see a lot more higher level of players and ability of players now within both leagues. And it's been like that for a while. But what's it like being in the championship? And also in terms of, as your career went on and you was in, what was that, Sunderland, again, very similar situation to Leeds, I suppose, in terms of massive club, big city behind it. But again, in a league which maybe they shouldn't have been in at the time. How do you find that as a manager?
Well, I think when you look at sort of promotion to the next level, you look at your group of players.
Yeah.
We when I was at Leeds, we had a front four, two midfield players as well that have proved what outstanding players that we had on our books at that particular time. We had Max Gradle, we had Robert Snodgrass, we had Becchio, we had Beckford, we had Johnny Howson, Bradley Johnson, Neil Kilkenny. So we had a fantastic front six, however many you wanted to say. So in League One, it was all about, doesn't matter how many times the opposition score, we're going to win more games than not with the players that we've got. And then you go up with that group of players, and one or two, I think Beckford went to Everton, and then you sort of put your mindset does change slightly because you are up against better players and bigger teams, and you then look at sort of changing a little bit of direction, a little bit more not really defensive, but you're making sure that you've got to be respectful to the opposition as well. Now you've got to make sure that if you open up the gates, you could get done because of better players are punishing you more often. So you have to slightly change your philosophies. And the same thing happened at Preston as well, probably more so at Preston, that we were a hard-working team with individuals, but we knew really we had a budget that was in the bottom three, where Leeds we were probably a top half division budget, so it allowed me to compete for that top half position. And we also, in the first season, we finished seventh, so we missed out on the playoffs just on the last game of the season. But it was a bigger budget, better players. But being at Preston was a bottom three budget. Our first intent is to make sure that we survive this division. At Leeds, it had to be trying to be in the top 10 at least, and trying to get into the playoffs if we could. But Preston were all about building the bricks again and building a football club back up. So we would end up sometimes playing 4-5-1, 5-3-2, 5-3-2, and probably hitting teams more on the counter-attack rather than being open, expansive, like we were probably the previous season, because we had Beckford and Garner up front and other players that we were one of the bigger teams in League One. But when you go into the Championship, you're small fry, and then you have to adapt your situation. And then the following season, we become a little bit more, because we survived. We finished 11th in the first season, which was a great achievement. The following year, you're then slightly changing your philosophy a little bit more from being defensively to then moving forward a little bit, thinking, well, we can get the balance right, still be defensively good, but ultimately let's try and take the game a little bit more to the opposition and see where we can flourish with these good players that we've now got on board. And then again, we finished 11th. And so to do that in 2 years on the trot was a great achievement. But what we had done is we developed and coached and brought in some real good players, people like Callum Robinson, Daniel Johnson, Barkers, and I'm just trying to think, there's a few more now off the top of my head, like Ben Pearson, Ben Davis. So these were players that were young, hungry, but we were, Jordan Hugles, another one that we'd got and we were developing and working with, and I knew that there was going to be a good bunch to work with. So with the third season in the Championship, it was going to be, again, more of a change in direction to what we can do going forward more, rather than just the other side of it, because we give ourselves a platform for 2 years to build off. And now we were looking to just go a little bit further and build. obviously that never came off because I went to Sunderland. But you go to Sunderland because of the size of the football club. I left Blackpool to go to Leeds for the size of the football club, and I left Preston, who I had one hell of a squad with, and that's proved the case where they've finished in the last 2-3 years.
Yeah.
But to get the opportunity to get manage a team that had been relegated from the Premier League, I knew there was issues with the football club, a bit of negativity and behind the scenes. But you knew that it was a big football club, and I never wanted to go to any. Never want to turn something down and have any regrets about it. I've turned jobs down in the past and I've not regretted it. But I just thought Sunderland was a job that if I turned down and somebody got it back to the Premier League, I would have a regret for the rest of my life. And hence, I took that bold decision. There was bigger problems under the behind the scenes than they actually realised, and it was a tough gig. And I think people have seen since that it isn't just the manager's fault. It's been myself's been there, Chris Coleman's been there, Jack Ross has been there, and Phil Parkinson's there now, and it's still in League One. But when I was there, the aspirations weren't being to survive in the Championship, it was to get back to the Premier League. And so the expectancy level was huge up there, even bigger than Leeds, because they hadn't had any success for a long time. And when things had been a little negative, it was really tough to deal with as a manager, but as players. The fortunate thing was at Leeds, when we went there with an expectancy level, we won games quickly. Yeah. And that expectancy level and negativity that was maybe there before, maybe Gary McAllister was there and got sacked. We turned that round very quickly, but we couldn't do that at Sunderland because of many, many issues, and hence I lost my job. Chris was there and lost his job, and the club is where it is now still.
Yeah, and I think as well, it goes back to what we were saying earlier on within the conversation, really, about sort of the the hierarchy of the club and whoever's in charge of the club and what their goals are and their aspirations are. And that thing I mentioned a little bit earlier on about time. I mean, like you said, say for example at Preston, it was almost the ideal situation because you was able to, not only did you have success there, but you was able to develop players. And I think going into coaching, that's what kind of the big key messages are. Can you develop players? Can you bring the best out of players and make them into bigger potentials than they actually are? And or from what people may perceive them as originally. And I think that, like I said, when you go to a club like, say, for example, Sunderland, and also the messages are get us back up into the Premier League, you'd love to develop players and things like that, but you're not able to because they have one set thing in mind. And that's where, again, I suppose your coaching and your managing experiences and your experiences of playing different ways. Like you said, at Leeds, you played in the League One, you was obviously a bit more attackive, not necessarily defensive in the Championship, but you had to adapt to it because, like you said, you was getting teams with bigger attackers and some players left. And I think this is a big thing where you have to almost, as a coach, face your experiences and what you go up against and take it all with you and adapt at that time. And I suppose that's what you had to do at Sunderland.
Yeah, definitely. And you talk about sort of promotions as a manager, and that's what you're judged on. But I take great satisfaction from seeing players that I've brought in on free transfers, minimum money, to work with them. Because I'm a coach. I love spending time on the grass, taking sessions. If you ask any of my coaching staff, I'm taking nearly every session every day. I do delegate quite some of the time, but I do like being out there. I like being out setting up the sessions with my staff and putting the goals away and everything like that afterwards when you finish. And that's just my background of how I've always been as a person and as a coach. And so your satisfaction is, as I said, winning promotions is great, but getting players in that you've suddenly seen an eye for or somebody's recommended and then working with them. Yeah. And then you see Jordan Ugle signed for £20,000 from Port Vale, and then he goes for 9 million. Callum Robinson was another one, a couple of £100,000, went for 8-9 million. Greg Cunningham came in on a free, goes for 5 million, and Daniel Johnson 50,000 and worth 4 or 5 million now. So they're the situations where you see players develop. And I go back to Blackpool. I had Wes Houlihan came down from Livingston, and Wes went on to have a fantastic career. So it's great to see players go on and, they leave your football club sometimes, but you want them to go on to better themselves because they've earned the right to do that by wanting to do it, learning, and whatever you've asked them to do, they'll do. And it's so satisfying when you see things like that take place.
Yeah, totally. And in terms of being as a manager for, like you said, your experiences, what you've gained and what you've had, And then obviously after Sunderland, you've taken a couple of jobs after that. How do you kind of get your, not even necessarily motivation back, because I think whatever club you're at, you know, you have goals, you have objectives which you're trying to achieve. But what kind of is your influences behind choosing a club, say for example, after you may have been at a championship club and maybe a club in League One might approach you? What's kind of your mindset as a manager? Do you sort of go, right, this is what I want to try and do? Is it still I want to develop players, or is it just based on specifically what the club are kind of after as well? Or is it kind of what you want out of it as a manager?
Well, I think from the Sunderland situation, I looked at it and I thought, well, I probably need a little bit of time out to reflect on it because of how tough it was, and spoke about all the things that happened there in terms of not the time that we're given, and players not wanting to really learn and get any better because they've been in the Premier League and they've dropped down, where I could have taken the whole squad from Preston to Sunderland and I would have done it without a shadow of a doubt because they were desperate to keep improving. The players have been in the Premier League and didn't want to be there. And so you look back and it's like, well, it was draining at times because you're trying to keep to your own beliefs and your philosophies, and then you're thinking, well, players are not really buying into it, and that's why the club went downhill like it did. And then as soon as I left there, I looked quite a lot of offers to go into work, and I thought, well, I'm going to take a few months out because it got to a situation where I was getting offered jobs. I thought, no, it's not quite right for me. I'm going to wait and see where I'm going to go. And I wanted to try and look for something that is going to be, again, another project as such. I don't like using the word project, but I like a club where I can have some foundations to build off to then keep developing it and leave it in a better state. And I had 3 years at Blackpool as the manager, 3 and a bit years, nearly 4 years at Leeds, and then 4.5 years at Preston. So I'd left all them clubs in a far better state, both on the pitch, off the pitch, better players, and I wanted to look back and think, right, then where's my next job going to be? What I'm going to do? And I probably made a wrong decision by going to Bradford because they offered me a 3-year deal, and I said I'll sign to the end of the season because I'd heard a few rumours about the owners behind the scene that weren't probably great to get on with. But I thought, well, it's still a big football club, and they're in the top 6 at the time. If we can just get a couple of results and it'll get to stay in the playoffs and hopefully work your magic in the playoffs, it can be a championship club again. And it was 40 minutes from home, which was another attraction as well, I suppose. And I just, within a few weeks, I just felt that it wasn't what I shouldn't have taken it, because the people who'd said to me, this might happen, did happen. And so I turned down the opportunity of extending my contract at the end of that season. And that following season, they got relegated from League One to League Two. So I was quite I didn't wish it on them without a shadow of doubt, but my instinct was telling me not to stay, and hence it did. And then I took a year out because it was the first year after I'd left Bradford, that pre-season that I'd not done in, I think it was 32 years. So from 16 to 48, I'd done a pre-season playing, coaching, managing. And I just thought, well, maybe I need to just have a little bit of time out. And I did a lot of media work, doing Sky Talk Sport, watching lots of games, going on different courses, still educating myself, going to training sessions. I went up to Newcastle to watch Rafa Benitez. I went to PSG, went to Burnley and other clubs as well with Sean. And it was all about still learning and developing myself, but maybe just give myself a breather to, without realising, maybe thinking, God, you've been working so long, and anybody will tell you when you're involved in management, it isn't a Saturday night 3 till 6, 3 till 5. It's 24/7. And over the years, it becomes more scrutinised by people on social media, and I'm not one for too much social media anyway, because you've got to. I have rhinoceros skin and elephant skin because I feel like I can take any criticism, but so the people that suffer off the back of it, you're not careful as well. So I had a year out, and then I still got offered jobs, but I didn't want to take them. And then the Blackpool situation came up where the Oyston family had left, a new owner was going in, and I didn't go back because I'd been there before or the previous history. It was more about thinking what he'd said, that the time and the effort, that he wanted me to rebuild a football club again, and which was music to my ears because I'd spent 3 years, 4 years and 3 years at clubs, and that's what I wanted to do. And then there was a new expectancy level, because all of a sudden from 2,000 fans there was 8-9 there because of the supporters coming back. So it becomes a bit more. The expectancy level was a little bit higher than it previously was. And then you get off to a real good start, and around Christmas time you're sort of second and everything's going well, but you still felt that you had a group that was overachieving, and it wasn't quite in a realistic position where it was at that particular time. We were certainly a top 6-8 team at the time. We certainly weren't the top 2, and then, as you know, supporters start dreaming of promotions again, which rightly so. But we did 22 or 24 deals in that January window. Yeah. And that, I thought, because we thought we still wanted to improve, and we were bringing in some younger players that I wanted to develop and learn and hopefully flourish to a better level, like I'd done previously at other clubs. Brought a couple of loan players in, and then unfortunately the owner decides that he, after a couple of iffy results, more draws and defeats, that he makes a change, and it's see you later type thing. So that's what you've learned at times as well. You've got to be very careful with the people that you're working for. That are you going to get what you were expecting in the first place? I get that you're going to lose jobs if you don't win football matches, but I still felt that doing 24 deals in January and then working with a new group of players for 2 games wasn't enough time to get the true reflection of where you were wanting to be as a football club again.
Yeah, totally. I agree. I think, you look at it in terms of, again, like I said, that big thing between building relationships between players and teams or individuals and teams as a whole. And like you said, I think a lot of people go in with the expectancy, especially a lot of like newer coaches and newer managers. They think, this is brilliant. They've reached a sort of holy ground. But as you've mentioned, sometimes the power's not even in your hands, and depending on who the owners are and fans as well. Like you said, the big negativity of social media. It just takes a campaign to get on the back of you, and then all of a sudden, they start believing it as well.
And that was probably an issue that I sort of had to deal with. And it is funny because when we were sort of near the top of the division, nobody ever brought up that I'd walked out on Blackpool to go to Leeds. Nobody had said that I'd been manager for 4.5 years at Preston, one of the rivals or the biggest rival. All of a sudden, results are not as they were. All these things start getting thrown at you. And that's what you have to deal with. And it's very difficult. I've said this a few times. I'm not sure I want to be a coach now starting off in the game because of the scrutiny under probably the time frame that you're working under these days. Because I felt at Blackpool, I won 1 game in my first 10 games at Blackpool. Yeah. If I'd done that now, or if any coach does it now, you're very vulnerable to losing your job. Blackpool stuck with me and stayed for 3 years and got promotions and that. So time is of an essence, but you're not given it sometimes. And outsider influences can certainly damage your opportunities of staying at a football club.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think as well, it's in a strange way, there's comparable factors there. I mean, you talk about obviously it being at a professional level and like it's the fans almost in back of you. I think almost as well, sometimes people are pushed away from coaching and managing younger teams because of parents. I think there's those similarities there with it. In terms of then kind of looking at whole of your career.
Can I just pick up on that? And I've seen that all the time because my lad's at Blackburn. He plays for the 23s and been through the system since he was 8 and been at loan at Grimsby last year or the year before. But went through them younger days of him. I'm stood on the touchline listening to sort of coaches coaches doing their job, but then parents sort of shouting on instructions differently to what the coach is doing. Yeah. And that must be so difficult. It's bad enough as a manager listening to people behind you telling you what to do. But when it's like parents doing it towards their own son, who are their sons going to take after? I think you'll agree. I'm pretty sure that a son would take more notice of his parent than his coach, and that is wrong. Yeah. When coaches are trying to develop and improve players.
Yeah, no, totally. I agree with you. I think that is, I mean, listen, I don't want to criticize parents because ultimately, let's be honest, anybody who has children, they want to go and see their child play, and they're quite rightly within their rights to do that. However, there is that big factor of, like you said, and I kind of always relate to school as well. And the 2 things I relate to school is that number one, in schools, you don't have your parents sitting in the classroom with you. but when it comes to football, you have your parents watching you when you're playing. And number two, tests. I kind of compare sort of like, you know, the training is the curriculum within school, and the test is the football match. And, you know, in a test, you don't get your parents shouting out, it's A, it's B, it's C, it's D. But in a football match, it's pass, kick, shoot, score. And it's, you know, I kind of sometimes when I'm mentoring coaches or when I'm doing sort of workshops with parents, that's the key things I'm saying to them. You know, you don't need to give your children the answers in the test. Let the coach, let the teacher in the classroom do that. Let the coach on the football pitch do that. So it's
give
hard.
them the encouragement.
Yeah,
give them the encouragement and the belief and helping them all out without a shadow of a doubt. I'm a parent, so I was doing all this with Joe. I was trying to be just a parent rather than a football manager when he was playing. So yeah, let the coach do his job, and as you said, have the parents have another skill and another attribute that they can bring to their child. Yeah,
definitely, and that helps them on their journey rather than sort of directing them on their journey in a way.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, in terms of looking at kind of like, you know, your whole career as sort of like player and manager, and it's a thing that they always say to players, but I'm going to put a bit of a spin on it. What kind of advice would you give to coaches who are going into management or players which are thinking of going into that management route? What would your advice be to them? What would be kind of the main standout point to be aware of or be apparent to?
What I think what I've always tried to do is I've always tried to be as level-headed as possible in terms of when I've won a game, say 4-0, I'm not swinging from the chandelier, drinking champagne, smoking cigars. And when I've lost the game, I'm disappointed, but I'm not showing the emotion where I'm not speaking to my family and being a right martyr. And somebody once said to me that you can never tell what result you've had on that Saturday afternoon because you're sort of quite level-headed in what you're doing. And it's never easy to do that because people have different personalities and deal with things in a different manner. Even the top coaches now in the Premier League, some will get excited, some will get more despondent, and that's just, we're all different. But if you can try and be level-headed and remain calm and within be disappointed or be elated, then great. But also, for any coach going into it, just keep learning, keep asking questions. If you can go into watch somebody trains, if you can, even if it's one little bit of advice that somebody gives you, it is one part of a tool of a process that can help you on your way. We go on all these courses and everything. Yeah, we might see X, Y, Z do the sessions, but it might be just that 1% different that you didn't even think about or know about. That might be the thing that you thought, yeah, that's me, and I've not done that in that way. If I do that way, I'll become a better person, better coach, and ultimately my players might become better players as well. So I think learning and asking questions and sampling good and bad scenarios, because you're not going to go through your life where you're going to, as a coach, for definite, where you're going to win every match, are you? So it's and enjoy it as well. There's a great thing to see that fulfillment that you get when you're seeing players score goals, go for big moves, or a young 8-year-old with a smile on his face when he scored the winning goal in the last minute of a game, whether it's a school game or an academy game. Enjoy it, because it's a group. Football's fantastic. Yeah, there's bad times, of course, but there's a lot of bad things in the world that are far worse than being involved in football. So I know there's quite a bit of advice there, but in different scenarios. But them sort of three things would be three major things I would say. And be lucky as well.
That is very true. No, I think that's fantastic advice. I agree. I think, listen, you need to enjoy it. And I think the key thing which you mentioned there about not having a poker face, but not being able to tell, whether you've won or lost, because again, like you said, these are all experiences, and you're going to face these experiences throughout, any career you're within, whether it be football coaching or just in a working day in a working environment. So yeah, I think that's fantastic advice. Listen, Simon, I won't take up any more of your time. It's been fantastic insight into your journey. I think your journey has been inspirational in terms of what you've achieved, what you currently have achieved so far anyway. What's next for you? Are you potentially looking to go back into management, or are you enjoying the time off?
No, I'm enjoying the time off, but I've still got hunger and desire, and that's what, if you've got that in you still and feel that you've still got plenty to give, whatever team you go and manage next, but then I want to go back into it. I want to improve. I want to improve myself. I want to probably prove one or two people wrong with my previous jobs that I've not gone, because it's gone well to a certain degree, but ultimately the last couple of jobs have not worked out for me. So I want to prove to people that I'm still a good manager. I've got promotions, I've got 700 games, 15 years of work. I want to be still doing this in another 10, 15 years. I'm not sure 20 years. I'm 50 now. I think Neil Warnock, and I'm thinking I think I'll be retired by now. But I've still got hunger and desire and a passion. And if you've still got them things at any level as a coach, then you still be involved in it as much as you can do. So waiting for opportunities, but also maybe looking at different opportunities. Maybe instead of working in the UK, might be looking for abroad, a job where I can have a different outlook on life, but also looking at different players in a different part of the world that is going to educate you, but you're going to educate them as well.
Yeah. No, fantastic. Well, listen, from my point of view, I hope we see you back in the game, like you said, in terms of just the journey you've had and also the impact you've had on players. And I'm sure many coaches as well who'll be listening to this and can take, like I said, from your experience. So, fantastic insight, Simon. Like I said, I won't take up any more of your time. A big thank you for taking part. Like I said, I really do appreciate it. And, I wish you the best of luck in the future.
No worries. Appreciate it. Thanks a lot.